humans are now hackable animals. The whole idea that humans have, they have this soul or spirit and they have free will and nobody knows what's happening inside me. So whatever I choose, whether in the election or whether in the supermarket, this is my free will, that's over.
Welcome to the session entitled Servants of God or Slaves to the Algorithm. We're going to understand the nature of free will in the great controversy and how artificial intelligence and algorithmic manipulation based upon data collection and surveillance will alter the course of human decision making. And also we're going to see technocracy doesn't only mean the normal meaning of the word is rule by technicians, by experts, but also technocracy can transition now to rule by tech. Not just by big tech executives, but by the tech itself. So we've got a lot to cover in the coming sessions on this very issue. But if we go back to post 9/11, I was a young teacher at the time and always enjoyed giving guest lectures to English classes in high school. And what my specialty was at that time was the surveillance society that was emerging post 9/11. They launched this all-seeing eye image and said, this is the Total Information Awareness Network. And then they shut that down because they got some pushback. It looked a little Orwellian. And that's why I was lecturing in English classes, because the high school students were studying Orwell's 1984. And I wasn't as interested in the fiction. I never really liked reading fiction. I wanted to know the real history, what happened before and what's coming now and where does that take us. And so we were looking at the surveillance society, the emergent all-seeing surveillance society that began after 9/11 with the Patriot Act and with other modes and mechanisms to try to keep an eye on the population, identify potential enemy combatants who had citizenship, who would have their rights relinquished because of a designation given to them by this growing national security state. Now, the time in which we live now, I mean, we're 20 plus years from that. The technology for surveillance has grown by leaps and bounds. I want to show you just some little ideas the World Economic Forum was teasing out there, and then we'll talk about how the big surveillance is social media and how that's going to build toward the relinquishing of free will in this time in which the rise of AI is taking place and the attempted overruling of human free will and humanity itself, as we'll see in a couple of sessions, is on the move. But first, World Economic Forum on dystopian surveillance, they put this out as completely normal. Now, that's something we were talking about building 20 years ago with retina scans and other biometric surveillance methods, but they're still advocating and advancing that. Here's another one where they're talking about actually tracking people and putting implanted surveillance chips into your clothes. Notice, what's your idea to cut fashion waste? This is the main agenda, not being free humans. I mean, does that make you feel like a free human being to have your clothes being monitored and they're going to watch every place that this item goes? This is something that's being put out publicly. Then there were the big scandals a couple years ago about the home assistants and the smartphones and the social media listening to what we are saying in our homes. This was real, not conspiracy theory. The Washington Post even posted it. Alexa has been eavesdropping on you this whole time. Why Amazon's Alexa is always listening to your conversations, Forbes magazine admitted and pointed out. This is Kim Commando, the tech guru, talk radio personality. She says Alexa is listening to your conversations. She explains, according to a new report by Bloomberg, Amazon has employed a global team of analysts that will listen to and transcribe audio samples from Alexa owners, including samples taken when the machine wasn't activated. The voice review process works by scanning harvested clips for keywords that Alexa is already familiar with, such as a brand name or musical artist. From here, the analysts listen to, transcribe, and annotate the clips, which has led to awkward collections like a woman singing off-key in the shower. Some of the clips, I can't believe they're listening to you in the shower. Some of the clips analysts received have a darker nature, like a child screaming for help. In one case, they heard what sounded like a sexual assault. Amazon claims to have very strict protocols over how they handle randomly audited clips they collect, saying your full name and address is never attached. I'm sure that doesn't make everybody feel a whole lot more comfortable with Alexa continually, constantly listening to you, monitoring for keywords, and potentially feeding your home family audio into the hands of these analysts. Pretty weird. And this was like an Alex Jones conspiracy years ago, back in 2014. Oh, it's a conspiracy theory that your smart TV is recording what you say. I remember seeing headlines about that. And they were saying on InfoWars, smart TV of Samsung records personal conversations and sends them to third parties. That did sound unbelievable at the time. That did sound over the top at the time. But here you got Kim Commando pointing it out today. Smart TVs do make it easy to stream our favorite shows and movies, as with any smart device. So we've got the Internet of Things. We got every smart device in our home. But this constant internet connection puts privacy into question. So is your smart TV listening to you and collecting data? Yes, smart TVs listen. They are not the only culprits, however. Your laptops, smartphones, tablets, speakers, and more can gather data about you. They compile your viewing and browsing habits to learn more about you and target you with ads and content. Even worse, your smart devices can share gathered information with third parties. Your apps are also guilty of spying on you. Smart TV manufacturers claim that they can give you more relevant recommendations by tracking what you watch. So she says in her headline here, watch what you say in front of your TV. Because voice recognition is convenient for finding content and controlling your smart television. But be careful with your words. Sensitive information can be captured and shared with other parties, so it wasn't a conspiracy all along. This is from that old 2014 InfoWars article that went viral, a 46-page privacy policy. So they're just quoting from the Samsung privacy policy, which is now included in all newly purchased Samsung smart TVs, states that voice recognition technology may capture voice commands and associated texts in order to improve the features of the system. The policy, a summary of which is also posted online, ominously advises us to please be aware that if your spoken words include personal or other sensitive information, that information will be among the data captured and transmitted to a third party through your use of voice recognition. So please be aware, we are capturing your voice information. Wow. They also, in their terms of service, talk about gesture controls and facial recognition. Facial recognition, the camera mounted on the top of your smart TV can recognize your movements. We record. Since its launch in 2010, Microsoft's Xbox Kinect Games device has a video camera and a microphone that records speech. The company informs its users that they should not expect any level of privacy concerning your use of the live communication features. While Microsoft also, so this is not the smart TVs from Samsung, this is in the terms of service of the Microsoft Xbox, that Microsoft may also access you or disclose information about you, including the content of your communications. That was in the terms of service all along of the smart TVs and of the Xboxes. Your phone is listening, and it's not paranoia. Oh, we all took it to the next level when we brought smartphones into our lives, Your phone is listening to you from Vice magazine. This is not, Paranoia, a publication. This is just a mainstream establishment publication. And it says, according to Dr. Peter Henaway, the senior security consultant for cybersecurity from Asterix and former lecturer and researcher at Edith Cowan University, told us this. For your smartphone to actually pay attention and record you, there needs to be a trigger, like Hey Siri or OK Google, for example, for the smartphone itself to listen. But when it comes to apps like Facebook, no one knows what the triggers are. It could be the word the or and, or in fact, there could be thousands. It's probably brand names, right? Seeing Google are open about it, I would personally assume the other companies are doing the same. So Google had announced that they were doing this, and he's saying, I'm sure Facebook's doing it too, even though they've vociferously denied it. Peter tells me, the author of this article, really, there is no reason they shouldn't be doing this. It's their business model, data collection and pitching products accordingly. It makes good sense from a marketing standpoint, and their end-use agreements and the law both allow it. So if the law allows it, if their terms of service allows it, and if it's $1 billion industry, they're going to be doing it. So this Vice journalist did a little experiment. You saw the headline, yes, your smartphone is listening to you. He did this 2 times a day, every day, where he would say phrases that could potentially invite ads on those very things. And boom, the ads would feed out onto his phone that were tailor-made for what he was talking about. I did a little experiment on that on myself. It was after a seminar. We had been talking a little bit about these things in the Media Mind seminar. And people at the DVD table in the foyer after sundown, we were talking about this. Well, let's try it out. And we started talking about, designer handbags just in our conversation. And then I pulled up a news website. I pulled up CNN.com. And guess what ads were in the ad feed in between the paragraphs on the article? Louis Vuitton handbags for your loved one or for your fashion, whatever. It was pitching those very things that we were talking about. Back to the Vice article. This privacy expert, Peter, he went on to say that just because tech companies value our data, it doesn't keep it safe from governmental agencies. The boundary between big social media, big tech, and NSA and CIA and governmental state actors is not very well defined. At most, tech companies are based in the U.S. The NSA or perhaps the CIA can potentially have your information disclosed to them, whether it's legal in your home country or not. And that's not even mentioning communist China and how these companies are also in bed with them. So yes, our phones are listening to us, and anything we say around our phones could potentially be used against us. But according to Peter, at least, it's not something most people should be scared of. Interesting way to end the article so you don't sound like you're, screaming from the rooftops. But he wanted to sound reasonable, but he said it, they are listening to everything that we're saying on apps. The apps are listening. So not the smartphone itself, but the smartphone is listening to you. Here's how to make it stop. So you can look that one up if you want to go to Kim Commando and figure out how you can do an end run around those things. But this was stated by a CIA chief. He said, we'll spy on you through your dishwasher. More and more personal and household devices are connecting to the Internet of Things, right? When this was rolling out, people were like, wait a minute, the privacy implications of this, the surveillance society is going to exploit the fact that we're bringing the internet. It's going to be controls. It's going to be controls on thermostats and stuff like that. Now we're looking at that, and deprived by design, they're going to be doing that in Europe and other places where they have these installed. CIA Director David Petraeus cannot wait to spy on you through them, said Wired magazine. Earlier this month, Petraeus mused about the emergence of an Internet of Things, that is, wired devices, at a summit for In-Q-Tel, the CIA's venture capital firm. The CIA has a venture capital firm, you might be wondering? Yeah, the dividing line, a little blurry. Transformational is an overused word, but I do believe, said former CIA head Petraeus, I do believe that word applies to these technologies, particularly to their effect on clandestine tradecraft. All those new online devices are a treasure trove of data if you're a person of interest to the spy community. Once upon a time, spies had to place a bug in your chandelier to hear your conversation. With the rise of the smart home, you'll be sending tagged, geolocated data that a spy agency can intercept in real time when you use the lighting app on your phone to adjust your living room's ambiance. Items of interest will be located, identified, monitored, and remotely controlled through technologies such as radio frequency identification, sensor networks, tiny embedded servers, and energy harvesters, all connected to the next generation Internet using abundant, low-cost, and high-power computing, Petraeus said. These are his words saying this is the greatest thing. We're going to be able to use all these devices for these purposes. Back to the article. Petraeus said, the latter now is going to cloud computing, in many areas greater and greater supercomputing, and ultimately heading to quantum computing. Petraeus allowed that these household spy devices change our notions of secrecy and prompt a rethink of our notions of identity and secrecy, all of which is true, if convenient for the CIA director. So there you have it, from the mouth of the intelligence agency head himself. Now, what kind of surveillance can it go to beyond capturing words and conversations in our homes, biometric information on our bodies, even the emotion we display in our face? Don't look now. Why you should be worried about machines reading your emotions, The Guardian reported. Machines can now allegedly identify anger, fear, disgust, and sadness. Emotion detection has grown from a research project to a $200 billion industry. Now you get to meet this individual, Yuval Noah Harari. You're going to hear a lot of clips from him. He's very clear and blunt about what the technocracy is doing. He's a World Economic Forum scholar. He's their darling academic. So the first clip we're going to hear from him is about this biometric surveillance, the reading of your emotions. Listen to this.
If there are people here who read books on Kindle, then you probably know, you should know, that as you read the book is reading you. For the first time in history, books are reading people rather than vice versa. As you read a book on Kindle, Kindle is following you, and Kindle, which means Amazon, knows which pages you read slow, which pages you read fast, and on which page you stop reading the book. And based on that, Amazon have quite a good idea of what you like or dislike. But it is still very primitive. The next stage, which is technically feasible today, is to connect Kindle to face recognition software, which already exists. And then Kindle knows when you laugh, when you cry, when you're bored, when you're angry. The final step, which probably will be possible in 5-10 years, is to connect Kindle to biometric sensors on or inside your body, which constantly monitor your blood pressure, your heart rate, your sugar level, your brain activity. And then Kindle, which means Amazon, knows the exact emotional impact of every sentence you read in the book. You read a sentence, what happened to your blood pressure? This is the kind of information that Amazon could have.
We'll come back to that issue of biometric sensors watching you from the inside. He has more to say about that. But in the context of identifying your emotions through facial recognition and then biometric sensors, you talk about a surveillance society. I mean, he calls it going under the skin. But the data, the quantity of data and the quality of the data that has been collected with our engagement with social media over the last 10 years is astounding. The famous privacy whistleblower, former NSA employee contractor Edward Snowden said, Facebook is a surveillance company rebranded as social media. He explains businesses that make money by collecting and selling detailed records of private lives were once plainly described as surveillance companies. Snowden said, their rebranding as social media is the most successful deception since the Department of War became the Department of Defense. So he's giving a comment there on Eisenhower's military-industrial complex. But nonetheless, you heard he said this was a great deception where people think it's just social media. No, it's a surveillance program. Artificial intelligence warning, AI capable of predicting and manipulating your future. That's where the control comes in. Artificial intelligence is capable of predicting your future thoughts without knowing anything about you. What? I thought they had all this data on me. They don't even need that. All they need to know, as it explains here in this new study, the results of this study showed that using as little as 9 friends of one user, accurate predictions could be generated. The findings have troubling implications for online privacy, namely that, in theory, not even leaving Facebook or Twitter could make someone exempt. So you see the idea here. All they need to do is know who your friends are and what they're like and what they like and the way that they are, and they'll be able to say what you're like as well because of the kind of friends company you keep. The internet knows you because of your data better than your spouse does. Scientific American. The traces we leave on the web and our digital devices can give advertisers and others surprising and sometimes disturbing insights into our psychology. So they create a psychological profile of what you are like based upon your Google searches, based upon your email and Facebook and social media use across the board, your shopping habits on Amazon. And there's so much data that's input based on so much of our lives being placed online in the hands of these companies that with their AI supercomputer algorithmic identification of your profile, they can create an understanding of who you are. What your thoughts and feelings are, what your likes and dislikes are. They know your personality, your character, better than your spouse does. This is what Harari says as well.
And humans really don't know themselves very well. This is why algorithms have a real chance of getting to know ourselves better. We don't really know ourselves. The central idea of this new worldview, which you can call dataism because it invests authority in data, the central tenet is that given enough data, especially biometric data about a person, and given enough computing power, Google or Facebook can create an algorithm that knows you better than you know yourself. Now it is becoming possible. It's possible for the first time in history to follow everybody all the time. And it's possible, it is becoming possible to go under the skin. It's not just seeing where you go, who you meet, what you say. It's actually understanding what you feel and what you think, and understanding this better than you understand yourself. Yeah, forget about your heart. What does it know? Ask Google. Google knows you better. So it can recommend to you what to study, where to work, even whom to marry. People make sometimes such terrible mistakes in the most important decisions of their lives because they don't really know themselves very well. But these algorithms, these systems will know us better. They won't be perfect. They don't have to be perfect. They just have to be better than the average person in order to gain control. And that's the end of all these old institutions and ideologies of individualism and free market and democracy and so forth.
So at that point, yes, just about everybody's a little worried that Facebook has far too much data about us. Google has enough data to make a 7-foot, 9-inch pile of paper on you every 2 weeks, which they then, of course, sell to the highest bidder. Said this investigation, as the tech giant is hoarding information about us and utilizing it for these purposes of marketing. This is kind of weird. Somebody a little immature put the green filter over his face because he's promoting and advocating these things. But listen to what he says here, that sometimes it sounds like he's critiquing it and that this is not a good thing, but he's just describing it objectively. But then occasionally he'll voice an opinion like this one.
Data is now the key to almost everything. It's the most important asset. In the past, like hundreds of years ago, thousands of years ago, the most important asset was land. And you had these big conflicts. Who owns the land? And then you had the Industrial Revolution, and the importance of land declined. And instead, the most important question was who owns the machines? Who owns the factories? Who owns the means of production? So you had these big conflicts, and we are just now marking the 100th anniversary of the communist revolution in Russia, which was really who owns these means of production? In the 21st century, the most important asset will be data. I'm not implying it's necessarily a bad thing, because it will be a very good thing in many respects.
Now, he was right on when he described the course of history and what's important at these key turning points in history. They're calling this the fourth industrial revolution. We'll talk more about what that means. But where he said at the end, I'm not implying this is bad. This can be a good thing in many respects, and we'll see what he means by that as we go forward, because this is not just for selling us things. The technocracy will be able to utilize this data. Where is this taking us? I want you to listen to this clip where he talks about the convenience. So here's a benefit that all of this data manipulation can bring to us.
The very meaning of human life is likely to change, because traditionally human life is seen as a process of decision making, of going through one junction after the other. If you think about great art, like you mentioned, A Tale of Two Cities, or you think about the Shakespeare plays, they're almost always about decisions. You need to make a decision. Does Macbeth murder the king or not? Does Romeo go for Juliet or not? You all the time have to make a decision. And it's the same with religion. If you think about Christianity, the great drama is all about decision making. You have to choose between good and evil. And if you choose good, you win paradise. If you choose evil, you go to hell. It's all about decision making. Now, what happens? How does a human life look like when all the important decisions are taken by Google? Just try to imagine your favorite Hollywood comedy or your favorite Shakespeare play. When Hamlet doesn't know what should I do, he just says, Google, what should I do? You know me better. So it could be a much more convenient and easy life for Hamlet if he just allows Google to take the decision for him.
So whereas religion requires decisions and the exercise of the will and free choice, well, with the algorithm making our choices for us, that will be just a lot more convenient for us. So it's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. It's going to make our lives more convenient. Remember in that Plandopolis cartoon from from the previous session, it was, sometimes I shop and sometimes I like to let the algorithm make my decision for me. That was in the World Economic Forum 2030. You own nothing. You have no privacy. You'll be happy. In the Plandopolis, it was your kid's college is allocated, your career is allocated, and decisions are not a part of that anymore. So they've been announcing this for over 10 years, back to 2011 with Plandopolis, 2016 with the you will own nothing, have no privacy, and you will be happy. And now they're coming out with these Harari clips saying this is not just our future, but our present in many ways, where decisions are beginning to be made by the algorithm, like hiring decisions, the new HR, how AI evolved the hiring process. Hiring decisions are already being made based not on resumes and interviews and human interaction, but personality tests and other types of online profiles that are built by questions that you ask and databases that can be accessed. And then human productivity for that job increases because the algorithm has made the decision. The AI has made the decision better than we have about who will be good for that position or that position. Now, do you have a right, you might ask, as this technocratic new order and way comes in? Do human beings have the freedom to opt out? To say, you know what, this is getting a little over the top for me. I kind of want to stay fully human with individual autonomy and free choice because as a Christian, this is my view, God requires that of us. He wants us to exercise and use our will. He gave it to us to be used, not to be handed over to Google, handed over to big tech. So can you opt out? Are there human rights in this technocratic order? Listen to Harari on this.
Homo sapiens is the only animal that can talk about things that don't really exist. Churches are rooted in common religious myth about God and heaven. States are rooted in common national myth. Business corporations are rooted in common economic myth about money, stocks, and the corporations themselves. Judicial systems are also rooted in myth, in common legal myth about justice and human rights. Yet, in truth, there are no gods in the universe, no nations, no corporations, no money, and no human rights and no justice outside the common imagination of us human beings. The fact is that there is no such thing in the world as gods or money or human rights except in the common imagination of human beings. And that's the end of all these old institutions and ideologies of individualism and free market and democracy and so forth.
So, of course, a secular-minded person like himself would say God is a myth and religion is a bunch of imagination of people. But did you hear? He even said human rights. That would be something that you'd hear screamed from the rooftops of academia in previous generations. The liberal notion of common humanity and tolerance and human rights, that is starting to fade. And the whole worldview is actually beginning to shift. I know I mentioned in passing that secularism is actually falling, because you're going to hear him talk about how new religions will arise, spiritual machines. We'll get to that. But the idea of human rights is now on the chopping block. So do you have a right to opt out? He said that human rights are a myth. They are in our imagination. So when things go this direction, in Foreign Policy magazine, an establishment mouthpiece, this is your brain. This is your brain as a weapon. The same brain scanning images meant to diagnose Alzheimer's disease or autism could potentially read someone's private thoughts. Computer systems attached to brain tissue that allow paralyzed patients to control robotic appendages with thought alone could also be used by a state, by a government, to direct bionic soldiers or pilot aircraft, and devices designed to aid a deteriorating mind could alternatively be used to implant new memories or to extinguish existing ones in allies and enemies alike. So they're saying this technology to control the brain, implant new thoughts in the brain, and have the brain control weaponry. This must be what Klaus Schwab was talking about when he said in his Fourth Industrial Revolution book that you'll be able to use brain scans to assess an individual's security risk. You look at their brain and you can figure out if they're a security risk. He said this: intrude into the hitherto private space of our minds is part of what the Fourth Industrial Revolution is about. Reading our thoughts and influencing our behaviors. This is from his book, Shaping the Fourth Industrial Revolution. First Industrial Revolution being steam power. The Second Industrial Revolution being electricity. The Third Industrial Revolution being the internet. And the Fourth Industrial Revolution, the Internet of Things and going within. As capabilities in this area improve, the temptation for law enforcement agencies and courts to use techniques to determine the likelihood of criminal activity, assess guilt, or even possibly retrieve memories directly from people's brains will increase, he says. So you're talking about human rights on the chopping block, all judicial rights, and the rights of the accused to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. Well, they're just going to read into the brains and say you're a security risk because we can identify this ideology or this hate thought. Even crossing a national border might one day involve a detailed brain scan to assess an individual's security risk. This is also called, in these circles of Fourth Industrial Revolution thinkers, is referred to as anticipatory governance. So in other words, we can control people's behavior before they act. And it's stated here in Wikipedia, anticipatory governance is the practical use by the state to collect information and data about its citizens in order to assess events or behaviors in a predictable manner. And that's really the golden ticket when it comes to all this data. Is not only can it create a psychological profile and identify what people might want and be willing to purchase, but it can predict their behaviors. And then it becomes a control mechanism when in the hands of the state, as if big tech didn't already have enough control as it is. Harari, on this clip, is going to talk about how people whose brains are not right, maybe they harbor hateful thoughts or any kind of malfunction that the globalists don't want people to have, you can be re-educated for what's in your brain, not for your behaviors. So it totally changes the judicial system and an understanding of crime, acts of aggression being that which is taking somebody else's property or harming their person or lying under your oath and breaking contracts and enforcing contract law. That whole system of judicial freedom and enforcement of protecting people's life, liberty, and property is now going within, and they're saying we can re-educate people. Listen to this.
It will demand a lot of changes in many fields. The most obvious is the legal field. The idea that we punish people for making bad choices, that should be out.
Okay, okay.
We still need a legal system.
So Bill Cosby couldn't control his choices.
But we don't punish him for bad choices. We should send him to jail for several other things. First of all, if you have the kind of brain that makes these decisions, then society should be protected against you. It's not a punishment for free choices, but you need to protect people. And secondly, deterrence. The brain, when it makes its calculations, takes into account what society does, if you do this or if you do that. So deterrence still works. And thirdly, and most importantly, therapy. If you have the kind of brain that makes these kinds of decisions that harm other people and that harm you, we should try and help you. We should try and cure you.
So not punishment for acts and crimes and behaviors and choices, but for what's in here. And then that can be conformed to this world rather than transformed by the renewing of our minds when in the hands of this power elite who have their idea of what a correct brain ought to look like, and anything outside of that framework is going to lead to choices that we don't approve of. And if those choices are criminal choices, we of course would punish for those crimes. But he's saying not for the acts. We're now going to begin going internally, reading minds, and the judicial system will be based upon thoughts, not behaviors. Even to control people's racist thoughts, we can correct that.
Unless you invent the technology to control minds, there isn't a technological way to destroy the deep source of racism. I'm quite confident that we will gain a lot more power in the coming century, which will solve many of the problems that now bother us.
So one of the greatest scourges of humanity, racism, of course, becomes the pretext and justification to invent technology to control minds. He says without that technology to control people's minds, we won't be able to solve the racism issue. So this is getting more serious. An algorithmic system that will collect and capture every human soul. And by that, I don't just mean person. I mean their very essence, who they are, their hopes and dreams, their beliefs, their likes and dislikes, their struggles, their passions, their growth, their everything about you, personality, psychological profile, character, your strengths and weaknesses. Everything is feeding into this system. And when the global ID becomes the capstone on that, then it can be globalist run and controlled, a technocracy the likes of which the most ravenous and ambitious authoritarian government never could have imagined. What does this have to do with prophecy? What does this have to do with the Bible? No buy, no sell is coming, where every person is going to be under a system of control. And it was kind of hard to imagine what that might look like in the past. People might make an excuse, oh, this is in the distant future. Spiritual preparations, I can put that off and procrastinate. But we're on the cusp of unbelievable, not just cataclysmic events, not just events that turn the table over so it can be reset, but technologies that can be enforcing the means and mechanisms of coercion, of deception, and finally of death decrees by those who would seek to control the minds of people. I mean, you know you've got the devil when he's saying free will is over. That's a thing of the past. The idea and notion of free will, that's history. So what I want to be our future is a refined and ennobled and redeemed will, where we offer it to God and we say, I want to be a servant of the Most High God, and I choose ye this day whom I will serve. Not to be a slave of the algorithm, to find boundaries and lines where I don't want to merge in with this right now and surrender my whole self and soul into the hands of the technocrats. But I want it in the hands of the Almighty God. If that is your choice, pray to Jesus and say, here's my heart, Lord, take and seal it. I want to be ready for these final events. And right now, I want a will that is strengthened. I want to exercise and utilize the will to subdue self, to subdue tendencies and impulses that arise from the flesh, that I might be redeemed and restored and transformed by the renewing of my mind, using our individuality, using our free will to bring glory to God in the context of a great controversy where Satan seeks to negate free will and God seeks to dignify the human person by granting us that freedom to choose him to become Christ-like in our character. That can only be done through choice, through free will. Use it while we still have time. May God bless you.